Welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast, the official podcast of esports. We explore the intersection of business and esports, one of the fastest growing industries in the world and the future of fun. Please welcome your host, Paul, the esports prophet Dawalibi. The Business of Esports Podcast begins now.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul, the prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. We look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't yet, go leave a like, a review on the podcast, share it with your friends and your colleagues. We know the business of esports is everywhere. I'm sure you see it everywhere, but sharing it with a friend who maybe hasn't seen it is really appreciated. Or leave a review and tell us how much you love it. That's also appreciated. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
Having a great week, Paul. How about yourself?
Crazy week. I mean, it's just, I thought it would be a little bit less insane now that, we've been back from all these conferences and, things would settle down at home. This is what people miss about conferences. The time requirement, like the time investment, I should say, is it's never just the conference itself, right? It's the conference and then the tens, if not hundreds of hours of follow-ups afterwards, right? Like if you've done the conference right, you've met a bunch of people, you've made a bunch of new connections. They all lead to phone calls and meetings and Zooms and God knows what. And so the time investment's never just that week. It's usually like 2 weeks after that also.
Well, not to mention catching up on the work that you had to put aside or hold off on to go to these things. So you're talking 3 times as much work, honestly. So it's fun. It's great. Better to be busy than not. I remember, when I was an independent contractor, when I was just getting into esports, and I would wait around all week for that one call or that one meeting. My call with you, by the way, was one of those. That was like the biggest thing I had that day, the only thing I had that day, and I was so excited for it. And, it's great and fortunate to be in the opposite position, right? Where it's just not enough time in the day.
It's one of those things where, but this is why I think there are some people who just go to like every single conference there is. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But why I tell people, of course, very humbly, you should only attend gaming, crypto, metaverse, Web3, whatever conference that you're into, where the prophet of esports is speaking, because that's where you're going to get maximum value. And this is where you should really be focusing your time and energy. I may be a little biased there, but
Well, I hope you're not teasing either a little too much on what we have up our sleeves here, but maybe we should change the subject while we're
We should change the subject. We do have something up our sleeves, so stay tuned. Definitely something up our sleeves. But good segue, because we do have an amazing guest who I don't want to keep waiting. Absolutely. Every week after week, they just keep getting better and better and better and better. And today is no different. We have none other than Nate Klaus, who is the founder and CEO of New Level Recruiting. Nate, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Nate, for our listeners who don't know about you, maybe haven't heard about New Level Recruiting, would love a little bit of your background, how you got into gaming, why you did, and a little bit about what you guys are doing at New Level Recruiting.
Yeah. Let's see. Should I start with my gaming history?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, funny enough, I just have been a gamer my whole life. Played Counter-Strike from when it was a Half-Life mod. I remember seeing it at a friend's house and had been playing it ever since. Played through the 1.5, 1.6 days, and then fell hopelessly in love with World of Warcraft. Played vanilla WoW, and then fell in love with StarCraft, and just played a ton of games, and then ultimately quit WoW when Cataclysm got announced and fell in love with League of Legends. And so I remember I was at a StarCraft 2 tournament with a friend when I saw League on a side stage for the first time, and I remember being like, what is that, a Dota knockoff? And then, of course, years later, ended up working at Riot and joined them as the first technical recruiter for Riot's esports team. And then as I built, and these are hiring all the engineers that built like wallesports.com. When you watch League through the stream theater, the live stats that go on. So hired those engineers and then ended up taking over the larger engineering, or well, taking over the larger recruiting team for Riot Esports. So did hiring for that. Then fell in love with a little game called PUBG and caught the bug for the battle royale side of things, and ultimately got a message from their CEO asking me to help stand up US operations for them and help them scale up their publishing in the US. And then, a little game called Fortnite came around, and, what I had seen at both Riot and PUBG was just on the internal talent acquisition side, a real lack of recruiting horsepower that really understood the gaming and esports space. And so I set out to create a firm that would fill the gap that I wish existed when I was on the internal side. And so now, 4 years later, I've been lucky enough to work with esports organizations, various game devs and publishers, and have even done a little bit of dabbling outside of the gaming space. And most recently, this past year, it's just been a ton of blockchain game stuff. As you can imagine, there's just heaps of money being thrown into that world by venture capital funds. And so we partner with various VCs that are quickly trying to educate themselves on games. And so I often end up playing nerd to English translator for some of the VCs and helping them then find leaders for these companies that they're giving tens of millions of dollars to.
It's a fascinating story. First of all, Nate, great taste in games, I must say. I mean, WoW, very close and very near and dear to my heart. I also played CS when it was a Half-Life mod, although I think I'm quite a bit older than you. But talk to me a little bit about recruiting let's start with a bit of your history. Talk to me a little bit about recruiting at Riot and PUBG, in the sense that I feel like you were there in the biggest boom times, essentially, of those games, right? Like with League and then PUBG, where I feel like with PUBG, that business, like, they couldn't hire fast enough, right? Like, they couldn't fix the game fast enough. They couldn't hire fast enough. Like, give me a sense of the hiring environment and the challenges around hiring in sort of these explosive growth phases.
Yeah. So, I mean, Riot, obviously at Riot, it was an interesting time because this was during Riot's hiring era where, at least at the Riot Esports organization, if you didn't lead League of Legends, we couldn't hire you. And so it actually was really difficult and challenging. I remember we were running efficacy studies on the recruiting pipeline of how many people we were putting through. And at that point, it was R&D and esports that had the lowest pass rate because, a lot of it was because of the outside of just what you can do for your job requirements that we required, which was that you had to have some passion for the gaming and esports space. And so obviously that led to a lot of the issues that have come out since. And if you are only hiring people into your team that are hardcore gamers or hardcore esports fans, that's a pretty small slice of the total folks that you can hire. And I think we saw that. Luckily, I know since then there's been quite a bit of change on that side of things to Riot's benefit, and they've been able to bring in a bunch of great folks. But I mean, it was to the point when we were recruiting at Riot where we couldn't post certain jobs because we couldn't get back to everyone that would apply. And what you never want to do is like have someone apply for a job and not have enough time to get back to them and tell them quickly, like, hey, I'm sorry, like, you're not a fit, because those are people who are also passionate players of your game. And one thing I will say about Riot is like they do a really good job of like sticking to their values. Like they really do care about players, and it's because a lot of people are big gamers at that company that it's such a big focus. And so obviously a lot of the people that you're talking to and interviewing are passionate players of your game, and so got to make sure you're treating them well too.
Can we touch on? I want to touch on one thing you just mentioned around the passion, and that being a specific criteria around hiring. I was just very fortunate. I teach at St. Peter's University, the Business of Esports, and they asked me to come back for like a career day to talk about the industry. And the question I think I get most often from students is, I'm super passionate about the games and gaming. How do I get a job in gaming?
Right.
And I think I made a comment, something to the effect of, passionate for gaming sort of feels like the baseline in the industry. Like it's such a desired industry to work in, right? I don't think I've met people who work in gaming who are just like, man, that gaming thing, like it's cool, but no, I don't really play or something like that. But like I've met very few people that aren't really passionate about the games also, right? So do you feel it's the baseline, or are you starting to see increasingly people who maybe have never played a game, don't care about gaming? Like if I'm taking the argument to the extreme here.
So for an entry-level role, you're absolutely right. You have to have some kind of passion for games to get in the door, because if not, there's a million other people that also have no experience or little experience and are more passionate. But I will say there's an inverse correlation between most roles and seniority and likelihood of being a gamer. And so
interesting. Industry wide.
I wouldn't say, when you go recruiting for other people, I think is kind of what you think about. And so oftentimes when I'm talking with companies, they come to me because we do work in a small space, and they'll tell me, hey, Nate, we know all the people who could do this job that are endemic in this space, and we're not really impressed with, or, we have already interviewed them, and we need someone who is outside of games currently, but might not put on their LinkedIn profile that they've played World of Warcraft for the last 10 years.
Got it.
And so, the difference is that there's a lot of firms out there that will go out, then talk to people, and someone will be like, oh yeah, I play WoW. My favorite one is I interviewed someone before, and they said they played a bunch of World of Warcraft, and I asked them if Horde or Alliance, and they said, I love making alliances. And I'm like,
no. Oh no.
It's kind of one of
Nate,
those.
were you Horde or Alliance? Sorry.
I played both.
You can't be on the fence on this. This is religion.
Look. Dwarf Priest back in the day, because Fear Ward was OP, and then when we started a guild in Classic WoW, I main tanked through the whole thing as a Tauren warrior, and we killed KT. Burning Crusade came out, and I'm like, I'm running a company. I can't play MMOs anymore.
But interesting. I want to just follow this line of thinking. Sorry, Jimmy, because it's something I talk about and hear about all the time. One of the reasons I got into gaming was I looked at the industry and I felt like a lot of the people operating in the space, running companies or executive level, while maybe passionate about the games, weren't necessarily the most seasoned business people or maybe right for the role. It's interesting that the companies now are sort of asking you to look outside of the industry, or that is a trend.
Like sales, I would say sales in esports is a big one. Like folks, the company that did this first, and probably arguably one of the most successfully, was when I talked with 100 Thieves. They were actually our first client because and so we ended up hiring their executive producer, who makes all their content, and Maddie Lee, who was their VP of partnerships and is now their CRO. And I remember John told me, he's like, we need people who understand, the digital media space, and we don't think that partnerships are done very well in esports as it stands today. And so we ended up taking Maddie from Barstool, and so Barstool, and this was again like 4 years ago now. And he had a little bit of, understanding of the gaming space that he wanted to do more for Barstool. And he was running into Barstool's CEO and, having make it harder for him to sell partnerships. And now Maddie's gone on to absolutely just crush it and the content side of things isn't doing too bad for 100 Thieves either. So they were an early success story that, my firm has got to point to a bunch of times.
Very cool.
Now I think we've placed like 5 or 6 leaders over there now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jimmy, sorry, I cut you off before.
No, yeah. This is a perfect segue, honestly, because Nate, would love to hear, you mentioned Riot, you're mentioning 100 Thieves. Would love to hear more about the companies that you're working with, working for. And I think we could do it as they come up, but would love to hear different needs or different, not just cultures, but what is important to a developer versus what's important to an esports team when it comes to hiring. As Paul mentioned with his students and me with mine, and we get it all the time on the show from our listeners. Everyone, is excited about the industry. There's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of people are uncertain how to position themselves, what really makes them qualified or what they should be looking for. So would love to really get into the nuts and bolts here of what you're seeing on the client side of things when you're dealing with such amazing clients that you represent.
So, I mean, it's been interesting. It's been year to year. So I will say the last year has been everything blockchain gaming, which is probably no surprise to anyone. But I would say when we started, 3.5, 4 years ago, it was during the era of like, oh shit, esports teams need to make money. And so, I mean, we were working with a ton of different teams. I mean, we placed Jordan, who's the CEO of Immortals. We worked
We
with
had on the podcast, by the way.
Jordan's a great guy. And we have worked with TSM on a bunch of different positions. We've worked with 100 Thieves. We've worked with NRG, Complexity, Tribe Gaming, Enthusiast. Our VP, Rachel, is the former head of recruiting for Evil Geniuses. And a lot of, I mean, I would say last year was big on the talent agency side of things. And so we helped place the head of TSM's agency. We've brought in some sales folks for Loaded as well as Adder. It's been all over the place. And then on the game developer side, we've worked with 3 or 4 of Microsoft studios. So we've worked with Gears of War, with The Initiative, with I'm forgetting the studio name, but it's the folks that do Age of Empires. And then we also come from the internal side of recruiting. So I think that's probably a big difference, and something worth chatting about is like most of the time, third-party agency recruiters just like hire people and never have to see them again. And I'll tell you, working at Riot was a trip, because anyone that I hired, I sat within 10 feet of. In the engineering side within 10. The room got a little bit bigger when we were hiring for the entire esports team, but definitely within 30, 40 yards. And there's something about that where like the people that are in the room that you see every day and care about, if you make a bad hire, like could really, mess their day up. And so I like hiring people that have had to work collaboratively and have had to work internal before, and kind of like see their hires do well or do bad compared to the agency folks that might not have ever met that person before. And also, I think it's a little bit of a different partnership when you're hiring for the same person for a long time. And, I'm proud to say that the majority of our work is from former clients or from clients that have been referred to us by people that we've made placements for. And so it's, we definitely take a longer term approach. And so a lot of what I've done now is just hired a lot of my former colleagues from Riot and friends that I knew from the industry. And now we're kind of on the hired gun side.
How crazy is the game developer market right now, Nate? Because you mentioned, right, you have all these hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. I think I don't even remember the number, but we talked about it on Meta Business, which, by the way, everyone should go subscribe to that podcast. That VCs have poured billions into blockchain gaming just in the last quarter, never mind the last year. We also have seen, developers break off from their, AAA studio that they were at to go start their own studios. So it feels like there's this really sort of aggressive market for game development talent. I'm just curious, maybe give some color, like how crazy is it right now?
Insane. And they're raising more. I mean, it is so nuts that it will take them multiple years to deploy all the money that they have. So, I mean, and also just to give some context too, I mean, even when I started 4 years ago, when a company would get like a seed stage funding, they'd get like $1 million or $2 million. Now I'm seeing companies getting like almost, $10 million seed rounds. And so it's just absolutely nuts. And so we've been lucky to partner with A16Z, with Convoy, with Lightspeed Ventures on some of like their investments and talking with their companies. We've also talked with like makers, and actually just wrapped up a search today for Night Ventures, and I love Night Ventures and all the stuff they're working on. It's essentially like Night is the company that manages like Mr. Beast and a lot of the other big influencers out there, and their venture arm essentially matches companies with their with potential or with influencers that can help with their reach. So Mr. Beast Burger is an example of that. Like, company that wants to put out food pairs with Mr. Beast now has like way more reach than they would have otherwise.
Real quick, because you had mentioned startups and the difference in seed rounds in just a couple of years. How is that correlating to the salaries that you're seeing offered for different level positions, executive positions, director level positions, entry level positions? Are they all going up as well, or what can you tell us about how competitive those offers are?
Yeah,
Nate, don't give Jimmy too many ideas here, okay?
I mean, if you're a gameplay engineer right now, you're getting, probably 10 messages a day to get paid twice as much as you were like 2 years ago.
Wow.
And so, the gameplay engineering market right now is so insanely difficult. Whereas when I was at Riot, we were getting it could be like a 30 to 40, or it could be like a 20 to 40% response rate, and maybe like 10% of which was positive. Now and this is across all companies from, all the various big tech companies. I probably don't want me to say they're exactly who they are, but let's just say like the average now is like a 2% or less response rate. So, if you're sending 50 customized messages a week, you might be lucky to get on the phone one engineer that you get to talk with, not even necessarily put into process. So they have huge teams of recruiters working on this. For perspective, Epic was under 40 recruiters last year and now has over 120. Riot is trying to add almost 3,000 people to their company this year. It is insane how much recruiting is going on right now in the space. And so it's actually been kind of weird because now recruiters are like the new engineers. They're really hard to find, and so finding good talent acquisition folks right now is really difficult. It already was because they're typically good talkers and not very many actually know what they're talking about. So yeah, it's been, I would say that across the industry, things have gone up. We actually participated in a comp analysis with A16Z, where essentially all the firms they're working with compiled their like rough numbers on what folks are getting paid across the industry, and you get like a blind data report from that, and it's crazy. Even the small seed stage companies are having to fork over serious dollars to get people in the door.
Wow. It was any of this part of the impetus for you to sort of go out on your own? Like what made you decide to go from, spending years in-house essentially to being on the outside, like a hired gun, I guess?
Yeah. It was honestly, I just saw firsthand working at Riot and PUBG that there would be these big pushes for hiring, and there was no one externally that we could rely on. My big requirement whenever you reach out to a candidate should be that you get 100% customized message. I'm sure everyone listening and both you guys have horrible copy paste messages that you get from recruiters in your inbox. Like, there's no reason people would ever want to respond to that. We have an internal Slack channel for my team of just surprise messages that we get back from candidates of like, oh my gosh, you actually took the time to read my profile. And like, and it's like, it's these things where you're like, this should be the standard, but it gets us a much better response rate, and it doesn't burn the brands of the companies that we're representing. And obviously it just kind of puts the human element back into things as well. Like, if you just treat people well, surprisingly things work out good because of that.
Who knew?
Yeah. Revolutionary concept in recruiting. But the reality is, look, no one goes to school to be a recruiter. I imagine, there's tons of professions out there where there's lots of people doing it, but not very many good ones.
So can you share more about why, these companies are, like you said, tripling or more just the recruiting departments. What are the benefits of outsourcing? If you can explain that in a little more detail, the personal touch you mentioned with some of these emails that you guys are sending. Would love to learn more about what's making you guys successful working for clients that have their own departments that are also recruiting internally.
Yeah, Microsoft's a great example. All of my counterparts on the Microsoft side are managing like 50 to 70 recs simultaneously. So there's no way if you're managing, I mean, if there's no way that if you're managing that many searches, and by the way, they're not unique. It's the same way for a lot of the other studios that we work with. Like their internal recruiters are essentially only have time to look at inbound applicants, and even then, they're making sure that hiring managers are aligned, doing a lot of the like hardcore, frontline work that you have to do to make sure that everyone that's going to be on your interview loop is aligned on exactly what you're looking for. Because if like interviewer A and interviewer B want something different out of that role, doesn't matter how many candidates you put through, they'll continue to fail. And so that's when we can come in and hyper focus on one role, or even have a team of people working on one role, it's just something that most internal teams don't have bandwidth for, or don't have the expertise for.
How much time do you spend, Nate, like cultivating the supply side, if you want to call it that, right? Like, because obviously you work with clients who ask you to go fill roles.
Yep.
But how much of your time is spent, Jimmy's unhappy, Jimmy reaches out to you like, hey, I'm looking for something new, like keep me in mind. Like, how much are you cultivating the supply side?
I mean, it's hard for me to cultivate the supply side just because our searches are so drastically different. Like, for example, I'm doing an executive producer search for a game company in Vietnam right now, and they are looking for someone who will relocate to Vietnam. And so I'm looking for, folks that are in the Asia Pacific, first and foremost. Like, it really just kind of depends on, who we're looking for and where. And so because each of our searches are unique, we do fresh research every single time.
So you don't maintain a database of people who are looking, or
obviously there'll be searches that come up more often, like sales searches in the esports and gaming world, right? And so if whenever we get those searches, I'm like, great, I know who I've talked to. But the problem is that every company has their own flavor of what they're looking for. It could be the same search, but one company might want someone from traditional sports, another might want one from digital media. And so I'm always personally very skeptical of the folks that are like relationship recruiters and like, here's my Rolodex of people, because I think those people usually just end up rotating their hires to different companies every 2 years. Whereas like I'll go out and be like, okay, you're looking for someone that has this type of pedigree. Like we have a whole research organization, and then we have folks that actually know what they're talking about that are like reaching out to these folks and getting them on the phone and talking with them. And that's, really my executive team, what I'm leaning on them for.
And where are you finding these candidates? I mean, is it largely LinkedIn? Are you going on to Indeed and the Glassdoor?
I mean, it really depends again on like where they're at, right? Like more creative folks, you're going to catch on all kinds of different platforms. I mean, LinkedIn, I will say, is still the largest one. If you want, I guess my PSA that I should say is like, if you want to make it easy for people to potentially offer you bigger and better jobs, update your LinkedIn profile, and also remember who your audience is. Like most recruiters are glorified keyword matchers. They don't know anything about your job. They don't really know what makes you successful. And so giving them a quick synopsis of what you actually do and what your company does will help explain it to someone who might not otherwise know, and can help, you increase your chances of being selected as someone who could be a fit for whatever job they're looking for.
Nate, would you add, such a great advice, would you add anything onto that? If I asked you, like, what's the message for people looking to break in? Because again, this is a question Jimmy and I get all the time. Well, as someone who places people in jobs every single day, right? Like, what is the advice for people wanting to break in?
If you can't,
and some of the keywords. Sorry, I want to add to that, Paul. Some of the keywords as well that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But keep going.
There's no silver bullet on this. I will say Eunice over at Inlight GG is one of the best offerings I've seen for folks that have absolutely zero experience and are looking to break into a specific niche, because she's offering like courses that will give you real life experience there. So shout out to Eunice. But I think other than that, like really just getting experience in a parallel industry. I mean, more and more we have to go outside of folks that are currently in the industry to fill these roles. And so, like I said, if you're interested in a social media type position in the esports world, go to a digital media space or a digital media company and do something similar, and then just have the passion for games to transfer in. But it's there is so much more competition at the entry level roles to get into our space that like just being passionate about the space isn't enough.
Nate, what keeps you up at night in terms of the business, right? Like what are some of the big challenges to your business?
I mean, I've been very lucky on the business development side. There's obviously not a lot of folks that specialize in executive placements across the gaming and esports space, and I think our competition deserves their air quotes when I say that. And so, I guess, I mean, because I'm a business owner that has 23 people on my team now, the thing that keeps me up at night is making sure that there's business for us all to work on. But I'm very bullish on what that looks like for the next 3 years at least. I don't, my crystal ball doesn't go further than that right now, but I mean, I just see gaming continue to expand, and there's so much investment in our space, and even some of the big tech companies out there are investing more and more in what the metaverse will look like. And I mean, we've just done a ton of work in that space, so that's probably the honest, like, what keeps me up. But I do think the blockchain NFT space will have a very similar cycle to what esports had. There'll be a ton of dumb money that gets poured in, and there'll be bodies and wreckage, and then there'll be a correcting, which we're starting to see on the esports side of things as well. Some of the low effort orgs are starting to die off, and some of the games that were propped up that were bad from the beginning can't sustain their leagues anymore, and so I imagine blockchain gaming will kind of have a similar deal. But what I'll tell you is the scariest part is how many finance bros are at the tops of these blockchain gaming companies. They're not gaming people, and that's been the biggest pushback that I've gotten from recruiting. Has been like, who's running the company here? Like, are these people actually gamers? And so that has been kind of the thing that I've been sniffing out every time I'm talking with these companies, is like, tell me about your background. What do you know about making games? And some of them are honest, and they're like, look, I've and then it's all just kind of we want to build something that people can speculate on. And then there's other people that are like, hey, I really see this as like, the benefit of being able to have a game asset that people can't take away and sell it on the secondary market. And as a hardcore Tarkov player, I see the potential there as well. I think interoperability of game assets is a pipe dream, and from all the engineers that I've talked to, they just laugh when they hear about that. I mean, if you think about it, there's so much stuff that engineers already have to do just for their game. The likelihood that a company would ever spend time to make sure that someone else's assets from another game will work in their game is just, the entire ecosystem would have to be different for that kind of interoperability to be incentivized. So I think we're a while out from that, is my 2 pennies there. But I'm definitely not down on blockchain. I think it's super interesting. But man, what a tough week we're having on the holders of the blockchain money.
I was speaking at Crypto Bahamas, and Jimmy was there with me 2 weeks ago now, and I think what I said was controversial in that room because it was mostly finance people, not gaming people, and it was like, hey guys, the games need to be fun, right? Like, we can't start with like 12 slides on your token and your economics, and then one slide on, by the way, we're going to make a fun game, and then 12 more slides on tokens. Like, you just kind of glossed over the hard part there, which was...
I mean, it is kind of sad to me that land sales are the new Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's essentially what you're buying when you buy land in someone's game. It's a Kickstarter. And you hope that your Kickstarter, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can see, or wait, actually, I don't have Gloomhaven over there. Gloomhaven, great Kickstarter, lovely board game. But, I think with a lot of these game companies out there that are raising tons of money with land sales, it's like, I'm very skeptical. It's kind of like whenever someone says to pre-order EA games, I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. Because they mess up every Star Wars game. And, as someone who has a lightsaber in their office, like, you want to see what you're buying before you buy it.
Jimmy, I know what you're going to say.
I was going to say I got like 5 lightsabers right behind me, but I guess you're not doing much hiring for EA then.
I would absolutely be happy to. I mean, I just personally am against the loot box side of things, and for what it's worth, EA has taken their licks from that whole. I mean, and if you think about that era was like, I mean, when I was at Riot, so I guess like 5 years ago now. I mean, I think they've made a lot of smart changes since then, to their credit. And I mean, for what it's worth, EA is a recruiting powerhouse. Like they really do a pretty good job.
Nate, can you talk a little bit about, one of the things I'm seeing in the news just in the last few days with the markets, not being pretty awful over the last few months and potentially going into a recession here. Where are you on this argument? Because you get this unique perspective of what the hiring, sort of market looks like. Do you see gaming in general, esports maybe specifically, taking a dip over the next, call it 2 years, if markets sort of soften the way that it looks like they've been softening?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if we'll get the same boost that we got through COVID, right? Like every other industry seemed to be taking a hit, but gaming benefited.
But will hiring slow down in your mind? Or do you think because so many companies are flush with cash, like...
It's hard to say. What I will say, having been in briefly, when I started my career, I started in aerospace and defense executive recruiting, and it was just kind of the end of like the 2008 recession. And what I've seen at the executive level, for better or worse, is that hiring doesn't really stop. Companies have to innovate when the market sucks, and they have to innovate when it's doing really well. And leaders turn over or switch jobs during that time either way. I think there might be some scaling down, but like I said, there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are getting deployed by venture capital funds right now into the gaming space. And so I mean, it's very likely that, at some point, if there's a downturn, that tap gets slowed down. But on the other end, I mean, they have already raised this money, and now it's really just about deploying it. And so I don't think they'll be done deploying it for a couple of years from the folks that I've talked to.
Jimmy, I don't know if you have any other questions before we move on to everyone's favorite new segment.
I'm ready.
I'm going to keep saying it's everyone's favorite new segment, even though it's not new. It's like 4 months old now.
But it is everyone's favorite segment. I get so many people that love this part of the show. I'm happy we're doing it. Happy you guys enjoy it.
So for new listeners, this is Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. What's going to happen here? Jimmy's going to ask Nate 5 or 6 rapid-fire questions. We're looking to get some insight into who Nate is as a person, as a gamer, a little bit sort of behind-the-scenes look at Nate here. So, Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Nate. First question: what game are you currently playing?
Oh, Tarkov.
Tarkov. How many hours would you say you play a week?
Oh, I gotta plead the fifth on that one.
Sure. Good choice. What's your go-to gamer snack or drink?
Ooh. I mean, if it's late night, Taco Bell. And I would say drink, if we're trying to keep it healthy, we've got the La Croix.
Oh, very nice.
Which unfortunately is called LaCroix per the company, but it's definitely should be La Croix.
As a French speaker, it is not LaCroix.
Let's see here. If you could go back to school, what class or major would you pursue?
Computer science degree. Oh my God. Half of my job is trying to find engineers for people, for different companies. If you're listening to this right now and you haven't decided, get a computer science degree. You can just work 30 hours a week and make more money than anyone else. It's like, dude, just do it. Do it if you can.
Such a good answer.
All right. Let's see. Last one here, 2-parter. This is my favorite. What's your favorite Ninja Turtle and your favorite Power Ranger?
Oh, Donatello, Red Ranger. Donatello, obviously, for bow staff, and then Red Ranger because I have a 5-year-old son and he's deep on the current Power Ranger iteration is like this dinosaur crossover. It's really
there's a current iteration. I didn't even know.
Oh yeah, I mean they're real. I mean, I will give them. They've always been multicultural, and got shout out to Power Rangers for that. But really, I mean, good show.
Best selection of Ninja Turtles Totally.
I can tell by Paul's smile how great the answers were, how great the episode was.
Fellow WoW player, of course he's going to pick the best Ninja Turtle. Come on.
Well, that's it for the cross. Back to you, Paul. Thanks,
Nate. Nate, for those of you who want to follow you, what you guys are doing, maybe follow New Level Recruiting or reach you for whatever reason, how do you want to be followed, reached, found? Where can people find you?
Our entire industry seems to be on Twitter. So I have a Twitter. It's Nate362. And if you ever have any questions about companies and who to get in touch with if you're looking for a role, or just general hiring advice, or even if you're a job seeker, feel free to email me. It's Nate@New Level Recruiting, but the E's are removed in level, so it's NEWLVL recruiting.com.
I love it. I think so many of our listeners, so many people I know who listen are either building startups in the space. Definitely encourage you guys to reach out to Nate if you're looking for, hiring help. I think what you guys are doing is so great. And, proof that the industry is continuing to explode. I mean, that you don't get sort of any more resounding proof than that. So Nate, thank you so much. Jimmy, thank you as always. For our listeners, just a couple of reminders. Don't forget, every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, we do a live stream. We cover all the news from the last week. It's a big cast. The best part is you get to get in my face and challenge me and ask questions, and it's a lot of fun. So it's a live show every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, everywhere you get Business of Esports content. And don't forget to follow Business of Esports everywhere. So on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. Literally, we have a presence on every single platform. It's either Biz Esports or Business of Esports. And good reminder to go subscribe to Meta Business. It's our sister podcast, our brother podcast, covering the business side of the metaverse and Web3. So really appreciate you guys listening. Don't forget, the future is fun. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Esports podcast. Check us out at thebusinessofesports.com and on Twitter @BizEsports.